Hello everyone and welcome to When Tomorrow Comes. This is iCini's regular look at the world of planning and development. My name's Dan Jestico, I'm iCini's Director of Futures. And this week we're going to be talking about Freeports. We are lucky enough to be joined by Perry Glading, who's currently chair of the Thurrock Business Board at Opportunities South Essex. How are you doing, Perry? Do you want to give us a bit of an introduction?
Yeah, morning to you. Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Dan. I'm also, and I think it helps in this context, I was also for 18 years the Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer of the Port Tilbury, Freeports, and I'm currently Deputy Chair of the Port Dover, so we'll leave anything on Brexit to another day if we may. And also importantly, when it comes to the Thames, I'm Deputy Chair of the relatively new set-up Thames Estuary Growth Board. So hopefully that will give the listeners a good sort of sense of my experience and background and where I currently am.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm sure Perry's going to bring a huge amount of expertise to this chat. We're also lucky enough to be joined by my senior colleagues, Matt Kinghan. How are you doing, Matt?
Hi, Dan. All good, thanks.
Good, nice to see you. We've got James Bompas. How are you, James?
Hey, Dan, I'm very good, thank you.
Good. And Lorna O'Carroll. How are you doing, Lorna?
Hi, Dan. Yeah, good.
Good. Okay, so welcome everyone. So onto the subject in question, which, as I said before, was Freeports. So the location of 8 new Freeports were announced in the 2021 budget a couple of weeks ago. But I think what we need to get a bit of an understanding of, because we had Freeports fairly recently, what are the new Freeport allocations to be used for? Terry, do you want to give us a bit of a background into Freeports and why they're hot news right now?
Yeah, no, happy to do that. I mean, Freeports, there's been a bit of mistaken communication about Freeports, that we can only have Freeports now we've come out of Europe. That's not the case. We had Freeports right up to 2012. In fact, my previous organisation, the Port of Tilbury, had one to 2012. And effectively, those Freeports at that time were there really for deferral of import duties and taxes. They weren't doing much else for the businesses and the local community. And for example, we would always bring over lots and lots of timber and building material from the Far East in November and December. There was a sort of quota system for those coming out of the Far East, places like Malaysia and Thailand. They would come into UK ports and we wouldn't start DIY as a UK until Easter. So they'd sit there for 2 or 3 months. They would defer the taxes. They'd clog up the port's warehouses. And that was how Freeports were being used up to 2012. They were just simply a sort of deferral of taxes and a way for ports to get volume through their quays. So that wasn't a good sort of Freeport model, if you like. What government decided to do post-Brexit is to look around the world, look at Freeports, look at some good models out there and how they work and how they shouldn't work, because there's some Freeports around the world that don't work that well. And what effectively they decided, and what Freeports are going forward, the way I would explain Freeports now is Freeports are secure custom zones. They're located at ports, so they don't necessarily need to be seaports. It's also airports as well. And one of the 8 that was selected was based on the East Midlands Airport. And they're ports where business can be carried out inside a country's land border, but where different customs rules apply. They can reduce administrative burdens and tariff controls, and they provide relief from duties and import taxes, and they ease tax and planning regulations. And that's an important consideration, the planning regulations. And there's more detail to come on those. They're also promoted as innovation hubs to boost global trade, attract inward investment, and increase productivity. And therefore, in doing so, the government wants the Freeports to generate employment opportunities to the benefit of some of our most deprived communities around the UK. And that also is an important factor in the government's drive here. It's all about the coastal community and deprived area. And it's a sad fact that, that where our ports are positioned naturally around our coast, is that we have some of the most deprived areas of the UK. And I look at particularly the bid that went in for the Thames, and you've got areas such as Tilbury and Grays and Dagenham and Barking, and some of the most deprived areas within the UK. So that's where the government have got to, and the selection of the 8 so far, and I do say so far, because I wouldn't rule out at all more free ports coming forward. There's no indication at this stage, but government made very quick decision on these free ports. These bids went in on the 5th of February, and the decision was announced by the Chancellor on the 3rd of March. So that's a remarkable turnaround for government to put these in place. So that's how Freeports is looking going forward, and there's a lot more detail to come, Dan.
Yeah, wow. So there's a huge amount of potential there. Lorna, what additional infrastructure do we need to support Freeports?
I think the delivery of housing will be key to support the success of the Freeports personally. If we take the example of the Thames Freeport, it's estimated that it's going to generate in the region of 25,000 jobs with further employment in the supply chain, and that's hugely significant in terms of job growth. And I think to ensure that that can be capitalised on, it needs to ensure that it's not constrained local labour supply. So I think that's where planning can probably provide a supporting role by identifying areas for housing to ensure that the maximum benefits can be secured locally, so that you don't end up with things like unsustainable commuting patterns by drawing in workers from far and wide. But equally, I think then if you have growing communities, it needs to be matched by things like community facilities, social infrastructure, to pick up on the levelling up that Perry has mentioned. So there's a real opportunity, I think, for the Freeports to be used to benefit local communities in existing locations. And then equally, if we think about other initiatives and projects in the pipeline, so again, referring to an example that we know in East Tilbury and crossing the Thames into Kent is the Lower Thames crossing, and the need for kind of joined up thinking to make sure that these initiatives provide the maximum benefits possible. So yeah, generally, I think the infrastructure is key.
Yeah, okay. So there's a lot of supporting infrastructure and community networks that need to be built to surround Freeports. James, coming to you, are there any sort of other regeneration benefits and planning reforms that Freeports are going to bring?
Well, what will be interesting is to understand the simplification of planning that Freeports actually bring, because I do a lot of work in the Thurrock area, and that includes the Port of Tilbury and DP World. And DP World, to some extent, already has planning freedoms already. It's got a simplified planning zone. It can put up sheds in record time in planning terms, and it'll be interesting to understand what the three ports bring in addition to that. I think the regenerative benefits of Freeports are huge. As Perry said, ports tend to be located, unfortunately, in areas where there is deprivation. We've seen that with Tilbury, but what a positive about Tilbury is that in a previous life, when I worked at the Development Corporation, we did a lot of research around jobs created in the Tilbury three ports and the benefits that brought to the residents of Tilbury. And actually, the Port of Tilbury did pay higher wages than the going rate in Tilbury. So it was seen as a huge benefit of the port being on its doorstep.
Okay. Matt, coming to you, is how do we make sure that the wider economic benefits are achieved without blighting neighbouring areas not in Freeport allocations?
Yeah, it's a good question, Dan. I mean, there's some of the less supportive organisations around Freeports do highlight the kind of potential for sort of displacement of businesses and of labour, as Lorna pointed out. So there does need to be kind of a careful sort of navigation around, you know, are we moving businesses into a Freeport from down the road, and therefore we're just moving jobs? I think there's a recognition that, you know, probably there's a reasonable amount of displacement that occurs. At the same time, there's obviously a lot of supply chain benefits. I think the way that the Freeports are organised now is that essentially if you had a manufacturing business and if you moved it into the Freeport, you know, you'd get a lot of benefits. So there's an argument to say that that's actually a sensible decision-making process. What we then think about is, well, if that business is going to grow, what about the businesses that support that? How can we kind of look at the supply chain effects? So I think that understanding, you know, the businesses that are in the Freeports, the nature of the economies around those, the subsectors, the strength of where the UK might be going in the future, what kind of technologies could invest there, and how can we really benefit from that? So I think, you know, now that we've started the process, and Perry, for example, started the process and got this kind of first opportunity, there's a deep dive into what does that business case look like, what are the various streams around it, and making sure that, you know, it's not just about the Freeport itself, but all the surrounding communities kind of get involved in understanding their individual roles in supporting it.
Yeah, okay. So Perry, coming back to you, does that mean you need a sort of regional approach to accommodate flexibility in Freeports? Or do you think the government is going to try and apply a one-size-fits-all approach to encompassing and wrapping up local businesses within that Freeport boundary?
No, you're going to need a regional approach on this. And I think that if you take South Essex under the SALA banner, which is the Association of South Essex Local Authorities, they've got to have good governance around this, very good governance. And I think they all recognise that they have to keep pace with the fastest process. The fast process is going to be Freeports. Unless everything around it keeps pace with the Freeport, then nothing will get done, housing and infrastructure and so forth. So the good thing about Freeports, it's almost speeding up all of the issues that we're all dealing with, which has got to be positive. But there's got to be good governance around this, and Thurrock County Council are going to be the accountable body for this. There's going to be a board that's set up, a Freeport board with an independent chair, and that board is going to have to be very careful as to what it allows in the Freeport zone, in order that it doesn't displace business on just for a like-for-like base without significant investment, significant increase in employment and opportunity, and it just doesn't move for the sake of it because it's in a Freeport and it gets all of the tax advantages and so forth from that. So good governance around this is incredibly important. It's not the silver bullet that everybody expects it to be, but it is an enormous catalyst in getting things moving.
Okay, right. And sort of a subject that's close to my heart is, does anyone want to kind of contribute on how Freeports may help build the green agenda and the green economy in the UK?
I thought it was interesting that in Scotland, which obviously operates in a slightly different regime, they're calling them green ports rather than Freeports. I mean, they're a step behind where we are in England, but they're sort of saying, well, actually, we're only going to give those benefits to the more green, kind of sustainably focused businesses. I mean, that's a step beyond what the government have said so far about the green, but the green ports. But I think, as Perry is highlighting there, it actually gets down to the management of the port itself, and, you know, the governance and the authorities and the steps and the forward thinkingness. And as I say, where does this country want to be? What are the technologies we're going to focus on? Obviously, we've got Ford down in the Thames, and they are taking forward a really kind of, you know, sustainable forward-thinking agenda around electrification. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to drive that.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think in the Thames estuary as well, they've published the Green Blue, which is intended to promote green growth across the estuary. And recognising the importance of it being responsive to things like climate change moving forward, but also to promote sustainable businesses locating within the region.
Okay.
The other thing I would add, Dan, if I may, to that is that I think there's a clear recognition through a number of plans that are not just Freeport, but around the whole green agenda. They're looking at the Sea Park initiative in South Essex. I think the Freeport will help with that process, moving traffic off the road and getting it onto the river. And with most of the Freeports having water connection, it's how we use the river, and particularly on coastal transport. We're almost going back 150, 200 years, that an awful lot was moved around the UK, coastal shipping. And we do some of that now. And I think you'll find that will enhance the movement between different Freeports as well, and different port locations to help the overall green agenda. So I think that all of that has got to be good news. And clearly one of the drivers of the Freeport applications was the green agenda, as well as anything else. So I think environment is one of the key measurements of success of Freeports when it's monitored in the years to come.
Okay, fantastic. Everyone, thank you all very much for your contributions. I think that's pretty much all we've got time for today. So I think the long-term future of Freeports is looking fairly bright, provided they can bring the economic and environmental benefits that have been set out and make sure that those benefits are distributed across the whole country. But watch this space for more news. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope to see you all again soon.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.